If I wanted to, I could take Kyiv in 2 weeks. This was a statement made by Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2014 that caused quite a stir in the Western public. For those who regularly follow military news, this might have seemed a rather modest statement from the world's most powerful man at the time. After all, the Kiev government back then had an army plagued by corruption, incompetence, and failure on all fronts. It was hard to believe that they could stand up to the vast, professional, and modern equipped Russian force, perhaps even for just a week. Yet, since February 2022, Russian soldiers have been struggling for every inch of land against their adversaries. Despite their overwhelming strength, the prolonged conflict has led many to wonder, why has Moscow not yet defeated Kiev? To answer this question, we need to return to the end of February 2022, when the first turning points of the conflict began to emerge. From the very beginning, the Russian military employed a blitzkrieg tactic, aiming to subdue their opponents quickly. This was evident in the element of surprise that Moscow maintained until the last moment. Not long before, Russia had denied all accusations from Western intelligence about an impending invasion of Ukraine, calling it fake news intended to escalate tensions. On February 24, 2022, Russia asserted that it was not attacking cities in Ukraine. Meanwhile, at a special session of the United Nations Security Council, Russian Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia emphasized that Moscow was not starting a war with Ukraine. However, the world was quickly shocked as Russian troops crossed the border into Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov declared that Moscow was ready to negotiate with Kiev, provided that Ukrainian soldiers laid down their arms. The Russian attack was well organized, with troops advancing from multiple directions, encircling strategic areas in eastern Ukraine. Over 190,000 Russian soldiers participated in the invasion, accompanied by 2,000 tanks, 3,000 artillery systems, and 1,000 rocket launchers. By May 2024, the number of Russian troops in Ukraine had risen to 500,000, thanks to Russia's logistical capabilities and massive reserves. The Russian Air Force and Navy quickly dominated, receiving additional support from separatist forces in eastern Ukraine, who had combat experience dating back to 2014. According to the Royal United Services Institute, RUSE, Russia had planned to seize Ukraine within 10 days and had prepared a list of individuals to eliminate or capture, including President Zelensky and Ukrainian officials. If successful, this would have been Russia's greatest victory since 1992. Currently, both Ukraine and the West face a harsh reality. If Kyiv falls, the new government would have to comply with all of Moscow's conditions, and NATO would have to accept that it has lost the race for influence in this sensitive region. The advance towards Kyiv became the most important objective alongside Kharkiv, a strategic and industrial area near Russia. Other attack directions aimed to paralyze Ukraine's defense forces, which were already scattered across the country, while also dealing with the potential threat of Belarus joining the conflict. In a weakened position, the Kyiv government was forced to consider negotiations when faced with the risk of collapse by the end of 2022. However, as Russian forces approached Kyiv and captured Antonov Airport, they encountered unexpected resistance from the Ukrainian side. Despite surrounding Kyiv and engaging in fierce battles in settlements near the capital, after 2 weeks of fighting, Russia's extended supply lines began to show weaknesses. The Kyiv defenders seized the opportunity to counterattack, forcing Russia to declare mission accomplished and withdraw. From early April, on the northeastern front, despite enduring thermobaric bomb attacks from Russia and rumors of Kyiv being surrounded or President Zelensky fleeing abroad, Ukrainian defenders resolutely pushed back the enemy. This situation impacted the entire negotiation process, as the outcome of diplomacy often reflects the battlefield situation. From the very beginning, Ukraine proposed peace talks mediated by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, an ally of Russia. However, after 5 rounds of negotiations, seeing the changing battlefield dynamics and receiving support from the UK and the US, Ukraine became more resolute, refusing to trade peace for territory or control over its military. On April 1st, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov declared that Ukraine's draft peace agreement contained unacceptable terms, dashing hopes for an early end to the war. Amid stalled negotiations, Russian forces intensified their firepower on Kyiv's defensive points. Despite suffering significant losses, Ukraine did not collapse. Instead, its military units began counterattacking in several areas such as Sumy, Kharkiv, Kyiv, and Chernihiv in the first half of April. At the same time, Ukraine received Western aid, initially just personal weapons, but later these countries provided heavy weapons, including artillery systems, missiles, and tanks. These weapons continued to support Kyiv in the prolonged conflict. In the latter half of 2022, the Russian military's tactics gradually shifted towards incremental advances. After reorganizing their forces, Moscow mobilized the Air Force to conduct airstrikes in coordination with ground artillery to clear the way for infantry advancement. However, the Ukrainian army managed to regain its morale and reorganize its forces, causing Russia's advance to be slow and bogged down in urban warfare. At the same time, Ukraine carried out several symbolic attacks, most notably the sinking of the Moskva cruiser, the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, which generated media effects and boosted the morale of its soldiers. Guerrilla warfare also increased in eastern provinces like Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kherson. These guerrilla groups not only fought against Russian forces, but also hunted down those supporting annexation into Russia. The Russian army found itself in a difficult position, having to deal with both the Ukrainian government forces and internal sabotage. Despite possessing overwhelming firepower, more than 10 times greater, Russia still couldn't completely overpower Ukraine. The prolonged conflict, with Western intervention and weaponry aid, played a decisive role. This is a familiar strategy from the Cold War era, where superpowers didn't directly confront each other but supported a third party in the conflict. Nevertheless, weaponry alone is not the sole factor that determines the outcome. If the recipient lacks resolve, they might fail even with formidable equipment. This is why the West placed its trust in Ukraine when they saw the nation didn't easily collapse, contrary to initial predictions. Looking at the failures of US-backed forces, two common characteristics stand out. First, these governments often rely heavily on guidance from American advisors. And second, they fight more for aid than for territorial control or national independence. This is evident in the former Saigon government or the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, 2004 to 2021. Simply put, if you are taking strategic advice from Washington, it's best to consider doing the opposite, because while it doesn't guarantee success, it at least reduces the chances of failure. The Kyiv government, although heavily criticized by both Russian media and some Western outlets, is not merely dependent on aid. Ukraine has made strategic decisions independently on multiple occasions, despite advice from the West. A prime example is the battle for the cities of Avdiivka and Bakhmut, which the U.S. deemed lacking in strategic value. President Zelensky even removed several officials who were close to Washington to maintain independence in decision-making. Moreover, Ukraine's counteroffensive in Kherson in August 2024 was kept secret from the West. Since May 2022, the Kyiv government has also cracked down on pro-Russian parties and replaced numerous corrupt officials, demonstrating that they are not merely following outside directives. The Ukrainian military and government displaying a completely different image compared to their previous reputation of corruption and weakness has turned them into a much more formidable adversary. Kyiv's resilience has enabled them to mobilize forces to fight fiercely and take bold actions, such as drone attacks on the Russian fleet or conducting sabotage operations deep within enemy territory, despite the risk of severe retaliation. This has complicated Moscow's campaign, as they have to contend with Ukraine's persistent resistance and unexpected strikes. Russian military mistakes have also provided Ukraine with opportunities to secure victories in several major battles. Most notably, the rapid counteroffensive in Kharkiv in September 2022 allowed Kyiv to recapture most of the province and inflicted significant losses on the opponent. Following this was the battle for Kherson, which lasted several days and concluded in November 2022 when Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu ordered a retreat, fearing Ukrainian missile attacks on the Kakhovka hydroelectric dam. These victories not only gave Ukraine hope for future successes, but also shocked the Russian public, who witnessed their mighty military facing defeat. Even when suffering heavy losses in battles like Severodonetsk or Bakhmut, the Ukrainian army maintained its fighting spirit without showing signs of collapse. In summary, Russia's failure to accurately assess Ukraine's resilience and the risks of a rapid offensive strategy from the outset prevented them from achieving a quick victory in the first year of the conflict. As the war dragged on, the West increasingly supported Ukraine, helping its forces adapt and adjust their strategies according to the reality on the ground. Despite Russia's superiority in manpower, they made numerous mistakes, allowing Ukraine to achieve symbolic victories and push the conflict into a stalemate. Russia has yet to fully defeat Ukraine, while Ukraine continues to suffer heavy losses, making the goal of reclaiming all its former territories seem distant. So, where does the future of this conflict lie? Some suggest that the Ukrainian people or the West may struggle to wage guerrilla warfare, as they are accustomed to wealth and have too many ties. But with the current level of devastation, could there come a time when those who once had wealth but now have nothing left to lose rise up and launch a large-scale guerrilla war? Share your thoughts in the comments. Goodbye, and see you next time.